Councillors, please be seated. Welcome to this full council meeting of the 30th of October 2024. A particular welcome to our new councillors, Councillor Carol Mayer and Councillor Alan Watt. Welcome. And we'd also like to welcome Jane Mingus, the new Head of Integrated Health and Care. Welcome to the role. There will be a lunch break around 1 o'clock if required, and there will be comfort breaks throughout the day as necessary. And just to remind members that there is an event at 4 p.m. to celebrate City of Sanctuary status in the Civic Hall. I'll now ask the clerk to take a roll call of those attending online.
Thank you, Provis. Good morning, everyone. We have no formal apologies for today's meeting. If I can just ask those that are online to confirm that they are present. I think Councillor Cuthbert.
Morning all. Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks. And Councillor James.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm here.
And Councillor Clogali.
Yes, good morning.
Okay, I don't think we have any other members online unless they want to shout out at this point. Thanks.
Bailey Ahern, you have a question.
Can we get that screen switched on, please?
Yes, we can try and sort that. Can we get the screen sorted? Committee staff are going to try and resolve that for you. Okay. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest in respect of items on today's business? There being no declarations. Bailey McLaren.
I would just like to point out that I sit on the board of Morrison's Academy in Crieff, the private school in Crieff, if that is appropriate to have registered as a DI.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henry. We'll note it as an item of transparency. If there are no other declarations of interest, we move on to item 2I, which is an urgent business item, payment of real living wage, motion by Councillor Lang and Bailey. Lane, even. Gosh, I had to do it at some point, didn't I? It's only taken 2.5 years. There we go. I usually get around this by calling you leader, but anyway, I'll go back to that. And I am accepting this under section 50B, 4B of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 as an urgent item on the grounds that the real living wage announcement took place after the deadline for motions for today's meeting. So, Mr. Leader, would you like to move your urgent item?
Okay, thanks. Everybody can see it. Well, I think we've been through this every year because it's the right thing to do. And if we can agree this today, just now, the extra money will be in our staff's bank accounts on the 1st of November instead of waiting until April. So I think it's the right thing to do. When you look at the papers we've got coming forward today, this will maybe help in some small way and be a bonus as they come up to Christmas. So no more to say on it. You can see it there, and I'd ask Bailey if he will second for me, please.
Bailey.
Thank you. I'm very happy to formally second this. I think without going through chapter and verse, I'm happy to have been able to bring this through many years, just reinforcing the fact that in both inflation and therefore the adjustment in the real living wage are trailing indicators of inflation. Therefore, the adjustments made are compensating for how prices have already risen. It's not a leading indicator. Also pleased to see that we're again having a shot at defining that this will happen automatically in future years. I did at the time welcome, I think in 2022, Councillor Peter Barrett's amendment, and we incorporated that. So hopefully we can make this something that comes forward automatically at this timing of meeting in future years. Thank you very much.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks very much, Provost, and very happy to support the motion. I just had a question on the necessity for Councillor Bailey to bring this forward, and I'm grateful that he did if that was required. But I certainly remembered from 2022 that the will of this council was that the process would be streamlined so that the living wage increase could be paid in time for Christmas, unless there were particular or extenuating circumstances which meant that that would not be advisable. So I don't know when we move to a different regime, but I'd be grateful to have some clarification on that, and also for confirmation that if there are extenuating circumstances which mean that it wouldn't be possible to apply the upgrade to the living wage, that would be notified to council in time for them to come to a view.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I had a similar recollection to yourself, but it turns out that the council did agree to pay the real living wage as soon as possible going forward from December 2019. However, last year we had a paper that effectively superseded the previous decision of council, which meant that there wasn't the authority for officers to implement the 2019 decision anymore, because we'd had a new decision that didn't cover that particular aspect, and we had missed it when that paper came forward. So this is required to ensure that it can happen again going forward. Are there any comments? Councillor Keith Allen, you also have a...
Thank you, Provost. Just in terms of raising everybody to £12.60, does that include anybody who is currently being paid more than £12? Thank you.
I don't feel able to answer the detail of that question. Pauline Johnston is perhaps on the call. My understanding anyway, Councillor Allen, is that it will apply to all the grades that are below that. We will try and get Pauline to give some clarification on that, but it would mean that £12.60 would be the minimum that any council staff would be paid. We will get a written confirmation of that. Okay. Okay. If there are no further comments, I'm going to go to Leader of the Council to sum up.
Just like to thank everybody for their agreement to bring this forward today, and hopefully this will continue every year without us having to bring, or any of us, because it's across the council, and all political parties have played a part in bringing this in the past. So thanks everybody for their views today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we agree the urgent business item? Great, thank you. Members, item 2.2 is a crisis grants motion by Councillor Peter Barrett and Leader of the Council, and I am accepting this as an urgent business item under section 50B 4B of Local Government Scotland Act 1973, on the grounds that if we did not approve the money required today, we'd have to close the rural payments tomorrow. So I have accepted it as an urgent business item, as there is no other committee or council meeting that could resolve this matter as expeditiously as required. Councillor Peter Barrett to move.
Good morning, councillors. Provost, I'm grateful to you for agreeing the emergency nature of this motion. Today in Westminster, the Labour government prepares to introduce its first budget, having trailed scrapping of universal winter fuel payments to pensioners and having refused to lift the two-child benefit cap on universal credit or child tax credit for a third child in a family, or for even larger families. And the prospect for young and old is therefore daunting and disappointing. Hugely disappointing because we know from the analysis in our anti-poverty action plan and strategy discussed later today in today's agenda that child poverty is more prevalent in larger families. So it seems perverse that such families are given less welfare support and are at greater risk of presenting to this council in crises. We know that child poverty has increased in Perth and Kinross. The Anti-Poverty Task Force Tackling Poverty Strategy that we will come to later provides details of the Joseph Rowntree's Foundation's estimates of poverty in Perth and Kinross. 16,000 under 18s, 5,200 under 18, 16,000 adults of working age and 6,000 pensioners, split roughly between very deep poverty and deep but not very deep poverty, but with the deepest poverty increasing. The strategy has identified the main issues, including emergency food and cash first approaches, income maximisation. It proposes a social contract for Perth and Kinross and the principles and commitments on which that are based around providing a safety net for those in deep poverty and an approach characterised by understanding, awareness and flexibility. And councillors, I would say that what I'm proposing here today with the support of Councillor Lang is consistent with the social contract and the characteristics of that approach. The motion seeks to address the strain on crisis grant funding, demonstrating understanding by recognising the increasing need for support for people in financial crisis. We are just halfway through the year and the budget for crisis grants is expended by half even before the winter demand set in and with needs outstripping previous year's levels. We can see from the children's scorecard the positive impact that our welfare rights team can make when responding to people coming to the council in crisis. Over £8 million of additional benefits secured and average household gains of over £1,000. We must be able to continue to support and respond to people presenting in crisis and then deliver that additional support to help alleviate poverty in our community. If people cannot turn to the council, then there are loan sharks and predators out there ready to exploit their situations and to make their lives a deeper misery. Through this motion, we are demonstrating awareness by responding to the facts presented by our welfare rights team and flexibility and commitment through the application of sufficient monies, the £150,000 from the Anti-Poverty Reserve, to meet the needs of members of our community through to the end of the financial year. And that seems to me to encapsulate the key components of the social contract in action. The proposals avoid, as the Provost stated, the alternative, which would be to take funds out of the rural hardship payments within the Financial Insecurity Fund. That would not only be robbing Peter to pay Paul, but closing that avenue of support to rural communities, and that's inconsistent with our no wrong door approach and is contrary to our approach which seeks to recognise and respond to the rural dimension of poverty in our area. It would leave us less able to take preventative action and early intervention, and to do so at a lower intervention threshold than exists for crisis levels, and that's a key benefit of the Rural Hardship Payment Scheme. This council has a strong cross-party record of working together to tackle poverty across all political groups, demonstrating commitment, resolve and resource to tackling poverty in our area, and I commend the motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Leader of the Council, second.
Thanks, Provost, and thank you for accepting this as an emergency motion. It only came to light because I like to keep track of where we are with our funds and anti-poverty funds through our welfare rights team, and it was really upsetting to hear that we were going to have to close the rural hardship crisis grants on the 31st of October because of lack of funding. So I'd like to thank Councillor Barrett for bringing the motion with me to do this, to show cross-party support for our residents. And many of us have many rural residents, and it's a different sort of poverty than it is if you're living in an urban area. So again, I'm sure that this will be passed unanimously, because I know that every one of the 40 of us in this room share the same values when it comes to helping the less or most vulnerable in our society. So I commend the motion to the Chamber.
Thank you. I have comment from Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I have to confess to being a little surprised to see this emergency motion before us today, as it's only a month since we were asked at Finance and Resources Committee to draw down £330,000 from the anti-poverty reserves for the Financial Insecurity Fund. I have asked what has changed significantly in the last month to bring this about today, and understand that there has been a change to the forecasted applications for these funds, particularly from pensioners. That's a situation that will be subject of further comments in another motion later this morning. However, in relation to our anti-poverty strategy, I think we need to look at the longer term and concentrate on improving the economy, getting people into better paid jobs and alleviating the pressures on a permanent basis. That said, as a member for probably the most rural ward in Perth and Kinross, the prospect of closing the Rural Hardship Fund without these additional funds is unacceptable, and I will be supporting this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Any other comments from members? If there are no other comments, Councillor Barrett, do you wish to sum up?
Just very briefly, to welcome the support for Councillor Duff. I would agree with him that getting people into work is vital to tackling poverty, but so is tackling in-work poverty, and the two are not necessarily exclusive of our ability to respond to people presenting in crisis. And I think it is important for the reasons that I outlined in terms of the impact our welfare rights team can have when people present in crisis, to doing the whole systems approach to benefits maximisation, and not just applying sticking plaster solutions is one of the significant benefits of the crisis grant funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, can we agree the urgent business item? Thank you. Members, move on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting. We are being asked to approve the minute of the council meeting of the 4th of September 2024. Can we agree that minute? Agreed. Thank you. Members, we now move on to item 4.1, which is a motion on the UK government's plans to add VAT to school fees, and I would like to invite Councillor Forbes to move the motion.
Thank you, Provost. Today I want to address a proposal that strikes at the heart of choice, fairness and fiscal responsibility. Labour's plans to impose VAT on private school fees may sound at first like an easy way to increase revenue for public services. But when we examine the real impact, we see a policy driven more by the politics of envy than by economic sense or social justice. First, let's recognise the contribution of families who choose to invest in private education. These parents aren't a burden on public resources, quite the opposite. By paying for their own children's education, they relieve pressure on our state schools. They're easing class sizes, freeing up resources and reducing demand in a system that already faces significant challenges. For that contribution, they should be thanked, not taxed. But Labour's proposal doesn't offer thanks. Instead, it penalises these families and effectively punishes them for taking responsibility and making personal sacrifices for their children's future. And then there's the VAT element. VAT is a two-way street. If Labour succeeds in making private schools VAT liable, it means these schools will also gain the right to reclaim VAT on their expenses such as capital investments. This reclaim option is no small matter. Some of the country's most exclusive private schools are already preparing to claim back millions, even tens of millions in VAT on capital projects from years past. The very taxes Labour claimed will fund the public sector could instead lead to a stream of VAT rebates, ultimately costing the Treasurer far more than it gains. Some economists are already ringing the alarm bells, suggesting that this policy may actually drain public funds rather than add to them. So Labour's plan doesn't just penalise families, it risks costing the country. We'll spend money implementing a policy that some experts believe will ultimately yield negative returns for the public purse. At a time when we should be supporting all schools, when every pound should be going to strengthen education for every child, Labour has chosen a path that divides us. Instead of investing in real solutions, this plan is built on envy, taxing families who've made difficult choices to provide their children with the best education that they can afford. So let me be clear, this isn't fairness, it's short-sightedness. We need a system that represents personal choice and values the contribution of all families. Instead of penalising those who relieve pressure on public services, we should thank them. We should be building policies that unite us in common purpose, not driving wedges between us. Councillors, let's reject the politics of envy. Let's stand up for a Britain that rewards hard work, personal responsibility and choice. Let's demand policies that actually improve education for all, not policies that divide us and risk leaving the nation with less.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. Education, education, education were Tony Blair's 3 top priorities in the 1997 general election. But VAT on private education is a tax on the 1,000 or so children being educated at Glenalmond and St Allan schools in my ward. Approximately 250 of these children are supported by bursaries by these charities. This was a tax too far for 170 girls being educated at Kilgraston School in Bridge of Earn. Provost, it doesn't matter if education is provided by the public, private or third sector, as in Strathallan and Glenalmond. Education is a good thing, whoever provides it. Taxing education of any sort is a very, very bad idea. It's also a tax on jobs in Almond and Earn. Private schools are the largest employers in the ward with 400 high-quality jobs where people like to work. We lost over 100 jobs when Kilgraston closed. It's a tax on sporting excellence. Strathallan School has produced 9 full squad Scotland rugby internationalists, and Duncan Scott won 8 Olympic swimming medals after having had a sporting bursary at the school. It's a tax on the relief provided to this council by not having to educate over 1,000 children at roughly £6,500 a year. A back of a fag packet calculation would indicate that somewhere north of £7 million worth of education that the council doesn't have to provide. However you calculate it, that's a big sum of money that this council just does not have. Lastly, it's a tax based not on improving the education that Tony Blair set his heart on, but based on the policies of envy, and that is an extremely poor justification for any government action. Provost, I commend this motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. I have a first amendment by Councillor, Bailey.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Provost. I'll start this morning by sharing a quote. I wonder if anyone remembers who said this. People know that when their bills arrive, they can cut their consumption, they can get a higher salary, higher wages, or go out there and get that new job. For those who don't remember, that was said by Jake Berry MP and then Tory chair in October 2022, commenting on the cost of living crisis. I put it to you that it's strange, isn't it? How when the poor are having a tough time of it, the solution is to get a new job or tighten their belts. Yet when the privileged few are having a tough time of it, they're being apparently punished by a party driven by envy, quoting Councillor Forbes this time, not a past Tory chair. Silliness aside, there's a serious point here. We have a 2-tier education system in this country and it's ruining it for all of us. To unlock growth and productivity, we need an education system that works for the many, not just the few. The way we achieve that is by having more parents and children invested in the state system. The private sector deprives the state sector of highly motivated kids and parents whose presence would enhance our state schools. Imagine what our state schools would look like if even 10% of the fees going to the private sector came to the state sector. The VAT move will bring further funding, which the Scottish Government, I'm sure, will invest in the state sector, bringing up standards for all of us. And of course, there's space in our schools for the kids from private schools to join the rest of us. I took the time to check the schools in mine and Councillor Forbes's ward, and they're between 46 and 78% at most full. Plus, we know that school rolls are declining across the piece due to another great Tory innovation called Brexit. This motion is couched in doomsday-like language, yet no one is talking about banning private schools or nationalisation. That other guy who used to sit next to me has moved on. Through the cost of living crisis, the cost of private education rose above education, yet the sector on a whole is still doing fine. We're talking about a luxury service here, one that's hard to argue should not be except from VAT. In closing, I'll add that turning Kildare-Aston's closure into a political football is disgusting. I might be Labour, but I know enough about free market economics to comprehend that in a healthy market, we'd expect that some operators will fail while others will flourish. Those who want absolute stability in their child's schooling are welcome in the state sector. I therefore wish to move that the motion is rejected. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bailey. Bailey, do you have a seconder? Mr. Leader, you're seconding.
Yes, thanks. Happy to formally second Bailey's amendment.
Okay, thank you. And in answer to Councillor Liz Barrett's question, it is just to formally reject the motion. I have Bailey McLaren next with a second amendment. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. I will be brief. With around 7 private schools located within Perth and Kinross, the impact of the addition to VAT on the fee structure is going to be felt. There'll be an impact on school rolls, with children transferring into the state system, impact on local employment. Let's not forget about this local employment, as there will be undoubtedly a reduction of employment within the staffing structures as the schools' roles decline. Many of the boards of these schools have been working in advance to lessen the impact of the VAT, enacting achievable cost savings whilst maintaining the educational standards. There will be an impact on Perth and Kinross spend, as has been mentioned before, as to those pupils who are supported by the council at 1 or 2 of the establishments. Currently, these schools are noticing a remarkable reduction in inquiries due to the uncertainty of the impact of this proposed VAT implication. But however, let's not forget this greatest impact is actually going to be on the pupils. Pupils who have not chosen to be educated in a private school. Parents and guardians have made this choice with the best intent for the child's development and future. For some current pupils, this may be highly disruptive and an extremely anxious time for them if they have to leave their current school. As Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, said to me, there are many reasons for choosing private education, and therefore the Liberal Democrats do not support this proposal. It is not always elite. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey McLaren, and I have Councillor Barrett second the amendment, but I've also just got notice from Councillor Forbes that he is happy to incorporate it, but I'll invite you to speak first and then I will invite him to come in.
Thanks very much, Provost. The Liberal Democrats are opposed to VAT and school fees, which represents a tax on education, but we do support a much stronger and fairer approach to charitable status, particularly with the requirement to contribute demonstrably to public benefit. In our view, charitable status is only justified by a major contribution to public benefit, and some schools may do this very well. But if you look at the trend towards international franchising and levels of investment in local bursaries and sharing of facilities, it is not always clear that public benefits are being accrued or delivered. Councillor McLaren has commented about the poor drafting of the amendment and what it doesn't say about the positive contribution that local private schools make to employment directly and via the local supply chain for goods and services. It is somewhat cavalier of the mover and the seconder of the motion to substitute rhetoric for substance. Motions should note what is important and not decline to mention them or dismiss the positive impact that local private schools can make economically through jobs and procurement of goods and services. So I support and second the amendment proposed by Councillor McLaren and the tidying up of the motion that provides. And I'm grateful that the mover and seconder seem minded to accept our amendment. I do want to focus on the second part of amendment briefly, and another important consideration concerning the government's ill-considered and rushed proposals. There is real concern that what the Labour government is proposing is contrary to the European Convention on Human Rights, with eminent human rights lawyer, crossbencher Lord Pannick, advising that it's strongly arguable that the imposition of VAT would breach Article 2 of the first protocol of the European Convention on Human Rights regarding access to educational facilities, or with Article 14 of the Convention, arbitrary discrimination in the enjoyment of educational facilities, particularly with regard to special education needs. Provost, there is a certain irony at the prospect of any parental or private school sector legal challenge to VAT on fees relying on hard-won and highly prized human rights of the European Convention that the Conservatives wish to scrap and squander. Maybe the dog whistle tunes of Bobby J on the EHCR will change regarding conflicts between government policy and the European Convention on Human Rights and the protections it affords to our citizens against governments of all colours who overstep their authority. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I'm now going to go to Councillor Forbes, who has indicated that as the mover of the motion, he is inclined to incorporate the second amendment. Can you just clarify that, Councillor Forbes?
Is this my opportunity to sum up as well, or does that come later? I'm happy to accept the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
The second amendment.
I'm just letting you come in now for the clarity of everyone else who's going to comment in the debate so that they know what they're commenting on. Councillor Lillingworth, are you happy to also incorporate the second amendment? Okay, thank you. So for the clarity of debate, there is now the motion which incorporates second amendment, and there is the amendment by Bailey Bailey and Leader of the Council. Councillor John Rebeck first, please.
Thanks very much, Provost. As convener of Leonard Families, I do feel compelled to speak on this matter, and I can hear the groans already, and that's just from my side of the chamber, actually. But before I read what I had prepared, I think there's a couple of points I do need to comment on. A parent or child who sends or goes to a state school is never a burden on society, which was actually suggested by the mover. Education is a right, it's sacrosanct and benefits society, not the other way around. I think we need to make that very clear. Neither is it largely a point of envy. I'm not envious that other people, many of whom are my friends, sent their kids to a private school. I will defend the right for a parent to make the right choices for their child as they see fit. So I am not envious. I am, however, really content that my two had an excellent education in Perth and Kinross schools. But it should also be made absolutely clear, as Councillor Bailey Bailey suggested, that any young person shifting from an independent school to a Perth and Kinross school will be made very welcome, and it will have advantages to our education system in Perth and Kinross. It will make school rules a bit more sustainable, which is welcome. The whole school will benefit from having more pupils in that school in an educational sense. And we'd be happy to accept the Scottish Government funding, which will automatically follow that increase in school rule. And I'm a great believer in parental choice, to be fair. That's absolutely right. Whether it's a wee school, a big school, a rural school, an urban school, denominational school, non-denominational school, all valid choices. And so is the choice between state school and independent school, at least for those that can afford it. And there can be no doubt that independent schools in Perth and Kinross bring value and jobs to the area, and that's very welcome as well. But the principle of independent schools being businesses or not was established by an independent commission led by Kenneth Barclay in 2017, albeit in the context of business rates. And like every other business in Perth and Kinross that brings value and jobs to the area, they should be liable for the appropriate taxation, and that includes VAT. I support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Rivett. Councillor Allen next, please.
Thank you, Provost. We come in here often and we hear about motions, and then we get amendments and we get people who are not happy with those amendments. It's all very well to have an amendment, but misplaced rhetoric in condemning a motion isn't helpful. I'd just like to clarify that the Kilgraston board specifically mentioned VAT as a contributing factor to the failing of the school, and that was certainly derided by the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't see any other indications for contributions, so Councillor Duff got in there just in the nick of time.
Sorry, Provost, I thought I'd actually already put it in. Beg your pardon. Yes, while it may seem a simple thing to place VAT on private school fees, I'm genuinely concerned that this policy will have unintended consequences. I think everyone who uses private schools, as we've already heard, are already contributing their share of costs towards the operation of state schools. So if the consequence of that pupils move into the school sector, it will place added pressure on our current resources and staff and reduce opportunities perhaps for existing pupils. The VAT policy will also have an impact on many pupils with special needs who choose to use private schools as they can provide some necessary additional facilities. Some will be exempted from the additional costs, although they may need to claim the extra expense back, provided they have the appropriate special needs assessment documentation. In particular, this policy will impact on many military families who serve across the world and may have children in private schools due to their military service circumstances. And I also believe that there are a number of small faith schools which may struggle if VAT is added to their fees. I've read that the government expects private schools to absorb the increase in VAT without passing it on to the parents. We know that in the majority of cases this is unlikely to happen and may result in closure of a number of schools, one of which we've already seen locally with the loss of many jobs. I've also read predictions that this hastily brought policy will actually cost taxpayers more, nullifying the very reason for doing it in the first place. I welcome the additions put forward by Bailey McLaren, and for all these reasons I'll be supporting the revised motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I'm now going to go to Bailey to sum up.
I'm content, thank you. I don't wish to offer any summing up comments. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes to sum up.
Thanks, Provost. Very briefly, I think what we see here is no one who's opposed to this suggestion has talked about the unintended consequences, which we just heard from Councillor Duff, and I think we need to think very carefully about those. Grateful to Bailey McLaren and Councillor Peter Barrett for their changes to it, which I am happy to accept, and grateful to Councillor Peter Barrett's guidance on how to write future motions, which of course I will take into account should I come back at any point in the future with another motion. And I'm also pleased but somewhat surprised that Bailey has such confidence in the Scottish Government regards to education, but I think I'll not say any more on that point. Look forward to the vote and we'll see where this goes. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. I'll now hand over to Mr. Hendry to take a roll call. And perhaps just given we've got new members, we'll explain the roll call as well.
Thanks, Provost. As you've already indicated, we have a motion by Councillor Forbes, seconded by Councillor Illingworth, that now includes the First Amendment from Bailey McLaren and Councillor Peter Barrett. We have an amendment from Bailey, seconded by Councillor Lane. So when I call out members' names, if they could indicate to me, and reminder to switch your microphone on and off, whether they're voting for the motion by Councillor Forbes or the amendment by Bailey? Bailey Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Bailey Brock.
Abstain.
Councillor Carr.
Amendment.
Councillor Chan.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Abstain.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Frampton.
Amendment.
Councillor Freshwater.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Is it again? Sorry, amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Kogali.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Amendment.
Councillor Mayer. Councillor Mayer, I know you're having issues with your microphone, but I did hear you say you're voting for the amendment. Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Deputy Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Watt.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Welsh.
Amendment.
And Bailey Williamson.
Amendment.
Obviously, we have 19 votes for the motion, 19 votes for the amendment, and we have 2 abstentions. So in terms of standing orders, can you confirm if you'll be exercising your casting vote and what your vote is?
I shall for the amendment.
Thank you. So the amendment is therefore carried.
Members, we move on to item 4.2, motion on winter fuel payment reform. Bailey, you have a point of order.
Thank you, Provost. I wish to highlight that the way in which this next motion is worded singles me out by name and means I'm not afforded the level of respect due to me from other members in this chamber is my feeling. I wonder whether Councillors Lang and Duff might reconsider the wording of their motion today to address my concern. Thank you.
Okay, it's Councillor Duff and Councillor Massey, but I think Councillor Duff is going to cover this. So Councillor Duff, if you could move your motion, please.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I do want to start this morning, but just with an apology that the original motion did have a specific councillor, Bailey, named in it, which is not in accordance with our convention. I apologise to Bailey for that, but the revised motion, which should be on the screen, has been amended to take that into account. Thank you. When Labour rode into Downing Street on a wave of elected MPs on the 4th of July, many of their voters had no idea how quickly Labour's promises would unravel. Within 3 weeks, pensioners across the length and breadth of the UK were astonished and angered to find that this new government, elected on a platform of greater integrity and transparency, was swiftly reversing its promises to the nation. And not just pensioners, Even members of the Labour Party were aghast at the decision, and just 2 months after the election voted in favour of reversing the cut at the Labour Party conference. Last month, in a Conservative parliamentary motion to block the cut, 53 Labour MPs failed to vote at all, including 8 Labour ministers, with only 1 Labour MP voting against the cut, the Honourable Member for Normanston and Hepworth. With over 860,000 pensioners across Scotland and over 32,000 in Perth and Kinross, this savage cut to winter fuel payments for pensioners of up to £300 will be keenly felt this winter. Across the UK, around 10 million pensioners will lose their entitlement to the benefit. For most pensioners, this payment was a vital lifeline support over the winter, helping them to provide adequate heating for their homes while maintaining a decent standard of living. If financial concerns cause pensioners to switch their heating off more often this winter, cold-related health issues will increase, impacting on the health and well-being of our elderly and vulnerable, and placing greater strain on the health and care services. A cold winter will cost the government and this council a lot more. We believe that the winter fuel payment should remain a universal benefit to those of pension age, and as such we strongly oppose and condemn the decision of the Labour government to introduce means testing. I have written personally to the Chancellor in advance of today's budget expressing my views on the proposed cut, but today, through this motion, I am asking the Leader of the Council to write urgently to the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the strongest possible terms. This letter to be signed also by the representatives of the other political parties, including myself, by the Council's only Labour representative for Perth and Kinross, and by the Council's Older People's Champion. Knowing that such an appeal to the Labour government being successful has as much chance as the Prime Minister turning down the offer of a free Jeeves and Hawkes suit, we would need to do everything we can as a council to help our elderly population to manage to stay warm and well this winter. We know that a great many pensioners have income slightly above the pension credit level, making them ineligible for the benefit, and that many who may be eligible are not claiming pension credit at all, so will miss out on the payment. I would therefore request the media to maintain their campaign to encourage pensioners to seek out help on pension credit eligibility. It is vital that all those entitled to pension credits are claiming this benefit. In this regard, I welcome the efforts of our Welfare Rights team in trying to identify eligible pensioners and encourage the maximum uptake of the benefit. I therefore urge anyone who thinks they may be eligible, or if you know of anyone who is not claiming but who may be eligible, to seek out assistance from either the Council or other sources of help like the Citizens Advice Bureau. Provost, the removal of winter fuel payments as a universal benefit, despite the promises to the contrary, is the wrong policy decision, and it will leave millions of older people across the UK, including many here in Perth and Kinross, struggling this winter. I therefore commend the motion to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. And I'm now going to come to Councillor Massey to second the motion, and if you can just confirm you're content with the wording changes, well, Councillor Massey.
Yes, I'm happy with the wording change. The winter fuel payment is a vital financial support system implemented by the UK government to ensure that older citizens can adequately heat their homes during the colder winter months. And while the intent behind these payments is commendable, the move towards means testing the winter fuel payment raises significant concerns about its fairness and has the potential to create inequality for older individuals. Means testing involves evaluating an individual's financial situation to determine the eligibility for certain benefits. While it is a tool designed to allocate resources efficiently and prioritise those in need, it also introduces an element of judgment that can be detrimental to vulnerable populations. In the case of the winter fuel payment, the means testing approach can undermine the very purpose of the benefit by creating barriers to access, promoting feelings of stigma, and overlooking the diverse financial realities faced by older individuals. Older residents often experience unique challenges related to their financial situation. Many pensioners live on fixed incomes that may not adequately reflect their living costs, particularly in rural areas or less economically vibrant areas where the proportion of their income spent on energy can be higher. Furthermore, the cost of maintaining a home, including heating, can vary significantly based on house type and personal circumstances. By implementing means testing, the government risks alienating many who may not qualify due to arbitrary thresholds, regardless of their actual financial needs. Means testing can disproportionately affect those who have worked hard to save for their retirement. Age Scotland estimate 1 million pensioners just exceed the limits for qualification, yet these savings could be insufficient to cover unexpected expenses, including the rising cost of energy. This will create an unfair situation where those who have been prudent in financial planning, perhaps even sacrificing in the past to save for retirement, may find themselves penalised at a time when they require support the most. Beyond the financial implication, means testing can lead to stigmatisation of older individuals. The requirement to disclose personal financial information and undergo a means test can be perceived as a judgment of one's worthiness or intelligence. Such policies may create an environment where seeking help is seen as a failure rather than a responsible action. For many older adults, the emotional burden of means testing can deter them from applying for the support they need, resulting in unnecessary hardship during the winter months. Moreover, means testing introduces administrative complexities that can burden both the government and recipients. The processes required to access eligibility for benefits can be time-consuming, confusing, and prone to errors. Older individuals, particularly those with limited technology skills or access, may struggle with the application process, thereby further complicating their ability to receive essential support when it is most needed. There are over 200,000 older people with a serious health condition or disability in the UK who may have to keep their heating turned up high or run the washing machine a lot just to maintain their health and well-being. Older adults are more vulnerable to extreme cold, which can lead to a drop in body temperature and result in serious health conditions such as heart disease, respiratory issues, and arthritis. A drop in temperature can exacerbate these conditions, leading to a weakened immune system, infections, increased discomfort, and complications. And with an overnight stay in hospital costing in the region of £1,000, it is important to do our utmost to keep our older citizens warm and healthy and out of hospital. A warm home allows older adults to engage in everyday activities comfortably, such as cooking, reading, and spending time with family and friends. It promotes a sense of well-being and enjoyment of their life during the colder months. Winter can lead to feelings of isolation and depression, especially in older adults who may already be experiencing loneliness. A warm, cosy home can provide comfort and encourage socialisation, help to alleviate feelings of depression and anxiety. Social connections are vital for maintaining mental and emotional health in older adults. Means testing the winter fuel payment will present significant challenges for older people. By imposing arbitrary financial assessments, the system risks excluding those in genuine need, creating stigma and adding unneeded administrative burdens. Instead, a universal approach that guarantees support for all older adults would not only uphold the dignity of the elderly, but also foster a community where everyone can enjoy their right to warmth and comfort during the cold months of the year. It is essential for policymakers to reconsider the implications of means testing and to strive for a more equitable solution that effectively supports the older population of Perth and Kinross. A universal approach where all older residents receive the support regardless of their financial situation would eliminate the administrative burdens and emotional stigma associated with means testing. A universal system promotes solidarity among older citizens and emphasises the collective responsibility for us all to care for our older populations without imposing financial judgments. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Councillor Roberts, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm pleased to support the motion. I was actually extremely surprised that one of the first decisions of the new Labour government was to introduce this policy. And it just flies in the face of things that you expect a Labour government to come forward with. I thought at the time, and I still think it was a very harsh and nasty decision, attacking people who as the previous speakers have said, are just over the threshold and won't be able to access their winter fuel payment. We live in a colder part of the UK, which has to be remembered, and many people struggle, even with the winter fuel payment, to adequately heat their homes. Unfortunately, also many older people tend to take a pride in the fact that they've been self-sufficient their whole working lives and don't want to fall back in the state in their later years and look for support. And so they're reluctant to actually apply for support during these difficult months. So for all these reasons, I'm happy to support the motion, and I'm just disappointed that we're having to actually bring this motion forward. It's not the sort of country I want to stay in, where the people are attacked, even though they're just over the threshold for support. It's very unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Mayor, with your first comment, please.
Thank you. As is commonly known and recognised across the whole UK, there are many parts of this country which suffer from colder, longer and harsher winters than that experienced in the balmy corridors of Westminster. In much of Scotland, many homes have already had their heating on, at least partially, for several weeks. The 10% increase to the energy price cap, which came into effect on the 1st of October, is causing worry and concern to people of all ages, but is a particular fear for those older and often less mobile citizens. Those who are unable to move about very much are prone to feel the cold much more, but may continue to keep their heating turned off or very low for much of the time due to the fear of cost. Bigger, older houses can be more difficult to heat and keep at a stable temperature, poorly insulated homes likewise. Low room temperatures can have many negative effects on the body, including those mentioned by Councillor Massey. Respiratory issues, cardiovascular, hypothermia, allergies caused by damp and mould, mental health, sleep difficulties. All of these negative health effects can lead to hospitalisation or greater care needs, impacting on quality of life for the persons concerned and on the SNHS or local care services. In the case of housing being affected by mould or damp, this could also lead to an increase in repair and maintenance costs. In 2020, the average energy bill for a UK household on a standard variable tariff was £1,125 per year, while the cheapest fixed tariffs were about £783 per year. While lower than it was at its peak in 2022, in 2024, the average energy bill for a UK household on a standard variable tariff now is expected to be around £1,717 per year. That's a real increase of £592, almost 50% more than it was 4 years ago. For smaller or lower occupancy households, the total costs may be less, but the percentage increase is likely to be much the same. Only pensioners receiving pension credit are now automatically entitled to the winter fuel allowance. Pension credit can be payable if the weekly income is less than £218.15, £11,343 per annum for single pensioners, or £332.95, which is £17,313 per annum for a couple. So only those who are already officially and obviously amongst the very poorest in society are being somewhat protected from fuel price increases. However, it has been widely reported that some pensioners missed out being able to claim pension credit because their income was just a few pennies above the limit, and that is a disgrace. Many pensioners wrongly assume that they will not be entitled and so have not claimed. The current UK government has referred to some of those not in receipt of the benefit as being better off pensioners. And that is also a disgrace, because a single person having a few pounds more than £11,343 per annum to live on most definitely does not meet any definition of the phrase being better off. As we all know, the energy price cap is up for review again in November, and if it is decided to raise it, bills will increase again on the 1st of January. But unless the limit on the income allowed before claiming pension credit is also raised, then in very real terms, many of those pensioners will be effectively and actually worse off than their poorer peers. So for all these reasons, I support this motion to both call on the appropriate persons and leaders within the Council to write jointly to the UK Chancellor, encouraging them to reverse the decision on means testing of winter fuel allowance, and to disseminate targeted literature to encourage maximum uptake of pension credit amongst the pensioner population of Perth and Kinross if they do not do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Donaldson, please.
Thank you, Provost. I entirely support the comments of Councillor Duff and Councillor Massey and of other speakers, and in particular of Councillor Mayor, what I thought was a very thoughtful speech and what is her maiden speech in these chambers. So I do congratulate her. Basically, I think what Rachel Reeves did as Chancellor just a few weeks into this Labour government was ill-conceived, was ill-considered, indeed was thoughtless. I'm not going to replicate some of the comments made earlier. I just want to make three brief points. One, there didn't seem to be any consideration, and it's not a contradiction in terms, to actually tax. It is a universal benefit, but to actually tax it for those who are on higher rates of tax. That would have got some money back, and I think there's some merit at higher rates of tax. Second point is an argument about latitude and altitude, about it in particular impacts people who live in rural, perhaps in rural areas, and live in more northerly latitudes. Obviously Scotland, but there are other parts of the UK as well. And my third point is this, and it's a point, and I see Councillor Barrett is going to be following me. It's a point made, in fact, by, I may have been critical of much of the coalition government between 2010 and 2015, but one of the success stories in that government was Steve Webb as Pensions Minister. I think he did a truly excellent job. And he didn't make the point in a newspaper article, in fact, the newspaper, not that long ago, about the fact that there's 800,000 people estimated by the Department for Work and Pensions who are missing out on pension credit, with an average unclaimed amount of around £2,000 per year. I don't have the exact figures for Scotland, but I think we would be talking of the order in Scotland alone of about 70,000. And given it's almost certain Rachel Reeves is not going to turn round and reverse this unfair policy, there is one benefit, one option I think could be carried out, and that is a claim by a pensioner for housing benefit or for council tax help should by law be treated as a claim for pension credit as well. And perhaps those who might wrongly consider pension credit to be charity, a tick box opt-out for somebody who really doesn't want it. I think that would actually really help to improve whatever the work of our welfare rights team, and it is impressive, but I think that administrative reform would really give many tens of thousands of people access to pension tax credit. And I think it's something I would fully support. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Peterband.
Thanks, Provost. I would like to say to Councillor Donaldson that, you know, if he ever decides to return to the Liberal fold, as he still demonstrates Liberal values, he'll be very, very welcome. However, Provost, I can't think of another government that has squandered its post-general election political capital in such a short period of time. During the Strathallan by-election, I want to congratulate Councillor Watt on his successful and spectacular election there. It became abundantly clear on doorstep after doorstep, and I'm sure that you experienced this too, Provost, how badly let down people felt by Labour, how quickly people's hopes had been dashed, with cynicism taking root in the face of the withdrawal of the universal winter fuel allowance, whilst Labour leaders and MPs were enjoying hospitality and the high life, the patronage of big business and billionaires, in stark contrast to the lived experience of normal people struggling to make ends meet, not profligate spending on designer goods with personal shoppers. Provost, the other Councillor Barrett will tell you that I'm pretty bad at mislaying my spectacles, but the idea that somebody needs to give me £2.5 grand to keep me in glasses is for the birds, and so it should have been for Keir Starmer. Perhaps we should feel sorry for Sir Keir, unable to make out who sponsors referees' kits from the lofty heights of the director's box at the Emirates Stadium, and where he should have gone instead for affordable eyewear. Labour got it wrong on the two-child benefit cap, and they've compounded their mistakes by withdrawing winter fuel allowance. The cliff edge cut-off of pension credit will tip just about managing elderly households into hardship. A pension credit's benefits take-up drive will still leave the vast majority of elderly people who are entitled to that payment without it. I referred previously to the almost £4 million that is currently lost in Perth and Kinross in missed claims for pension credit, and which is highlighted in the Perth and Kinross anti-poverty strategy that again we'll discuss later. And you have to question how successful any such campaign will be, competing against the mood music of Rachel Reeves' much-trailed benefit fraud crackdown and the stigmatising and deterrence impact of making honest claimants ashamed of being on welfare. According to the government's own figures, 800,000 of the lowest income pensioners are currently eligible for pension credit but do not claim it, meaning that they will lose their winter fuel payments. Labour's plans, which, let's remember, weren't part of their election manifesto, weren't subject to scrutiny and debate at the ballot box, and have no democratic mandate, will mean that 10 million pensioners are set to lose the £300 payment this year across the UK. And as Councillor Mayor said eloquently and with a command of detail, this comes at a time when energy bills are set to increase due to the increase in the energy price cap, and I congratulate Councillor Mayor on her election as well. Of these, the charity Age Concern has warned that 2 million people will find paying their energy bills a real stretch and will be seriously hit by the cut. Provost, finally, I just want to make a comment. I'm pleased that the mover and seconder of the motion amended it in light of the comments of Councillor Bailey. I do think that we have had too much letter writing itis, and I think there's been a kind of gotcha approach in motions to this council about getting people to sign things that they don't agree with. Personally, I'm perfectly happy to sign this letter, but there will come a time where I'm not. And if anybody thinks that by passing a motion in this council, I'm going to sign up to a letter that I fundamentally disagree with, they've got another thing coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, and obviously it would be against your human rights to make you do something you do not wish to do, so we wouldn't do that. Councillor John Rebek, next please.
Thanks again, Provost. I've just got a couple of comments to add to what's already been said in the context of the Perth City by-election. Before I do that, I always thought that you were the other Councillor Barrett, Peter, but there you go. Thank you. The serious point, I guess, is that I think we're all aware that when politicians post on social media after a canvass session, that what they say constituents have been speaking about is actually what they want to speak about. However, there is a reality in this case that when we chat to doors in Perth City North, we were genuinely determined to speak about local issues, whether they were good for us or bad for us, whether it was the good work of the hub in Letham, whether it was the Tulloch Ball Court, whether it was empty or dilapidated buildings, or indeed whether it was PH2O. And we did speak about those things. But what came up time after time, genuinely unsolicited more than anything else, was the cut to winter fuel payments. People were angry or worried or both. And it does strike me that Scotland is an energy-rich country, both in terms of traditional fossil fuels and in all kinds of renewable energy sources. And yet, huge numbers of our older people in Perth and Kinross exist in fuel poverty and will avoid putting their heating on this winter to the detriment of their health. This does not make any sense whatsoever, and I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Reddick. Councillor Tom McEwen.
Thank you very much, Provost. I support the motion. It's not a no-brainer, really. You know, Labour at Westminster seem to be living in their own bubble. A bubble I think that our constituents in Perth and Kinross will not recognise. Later in this meeting, there will be papers regarding poverty. There's 2 papers on poverty, and I'll have questions on them and comments to make on them as they come forward. But one thing I pick out of them is that they describe is that you cannot describe poverty based on income. There are other things, other demands on people's lives, especially rurally, where it's just, whereas this decision by Labour is purely on income. So it makes no sense to withdraw this money based on income when measuring poverty is not an income-based assessment. So they are so far away from where a Labour government should be. It's just showed that what they said during the general election was not truthful, in my opinion. What I do see a bit of consternation in this and who are bringing this motion forward is that there's this universality of heating allowance is exactly the same as universality of free prescriptions. That for the same reasons, people need support for their healthcare as they do for their heating. And to be universal on heating and not universal on free prescriptions doesn't make any sense in my book. And I support universality in both of these incidents. So I think that's something that all members need to reflect on. If you want universality of heating allowance for the reasons of poverty, so people can afford it, this applies to other things that are universally presented for individuals' benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Final comment, Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. I'm sadly not surprised we're debating things out with our control again today. I suppose it does bump child poverty down the agenda, but maybe that's the plan. I'm actually most surprised at the Tory SNP partnership that's emerging here, given the one person who can address this in Scotland is John Swinney. I'm not sure why he's being given safe harbour in Perth today. The Scottish Government have various economic and tax levers at its disposal, reflecting the fact that Scotland is a colder country in part. And if it wished to pay the winter fuel allowance, it could. If it wanted to tweak the means testing, it could. If it wanted to taper the means testing, it could. So I'm confused at some of the conversations I've heard from the other side of the chamber today. So it's weird as well that we aren't writing to the people who decide this matter for the people of Perth and Kinross. I'm looking to my right as I say that. It seems strange that they're letting John Swinney and the Scottish Government off the hook completely on this matter. I'll say it again, John Swinney is the person who decides this all for Perth and Kinross residents. Rest assured, I've not brought any motions about the SNP failing people, but if I did, we'd be here forever. Actually, I don't need to. The Child Poverty Report later catalogues their failure just fine. 17 years in power and 1 in 5 kids living locally in poverty. Stronger for Scotland, I write. You're all welcome to send what letters you like, but I find it strange that you're not writing to the people who decide this for Perth and Kinross residents. That makes this whole thing quite the empty political gesture. I'll not be signing any letter that I disagree with the contents of. Please record my dissent to the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bailey. I did say it was going to be the last comment, but Councillor Forbes has sneaked in, and I suspect the Leader of the Council also wants to come in, so brief comments from both.
Happy to sacrifice my comment and for the sake of expediency, if Councillor Lang is willing to do the same.
When you weren't paying attention there, Mr. Leader, we were discussing whether you were getting a comment. Do you wish a comment? If you do, Councillor Forbes wants his one as well.
Yeah, but I still want to comment.
You're right, okay. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, I will be very brief. I think the only thing out of this for me is sadness, and I think back to our good friend and ex-colleague, Councillor Brian Leishman, who sat just along the table from me and made eloquent speeches about poverty, but as soon as he gets to Westminster, he seems to be happy to vote for these kind of things. I find that just genuinely very sad, and I actually have a huge amount of sympathy with Bailey's point that this is not entirely in the hands of the Labour government, and I think what he said is absolutely correct. I'll leave it at that, Provost, and hopefully we can move on quickly. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, your comment.
Yes, and it relates to Scotland being a very generator of electricity. So I'd just like to thank Councillor Bailey for his summation and obviously the way he would support an independent Scotland. We would then be able to make all the decisions over funding here. So thanks, Bailey.
Thank you. I don't have a bingo card today, but I think we've just about hit everyone's bingo sheet during the debates. Councillor Duff, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Provost. I will be brief. I'd just like to thank everyone for their comments today. I think we've given it all a good hearing, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, can we agree the motion? Good, thank you. Members, item 5 is the outstanding business statement. Can we agree the outstanding business statement? Or sorry, are there any questions, first of all, on the outstanding business statement? If there are no questions on the outstanding business statement, can we agree the outstanding business statement? Thank you. Members, it is 12 minutes to 12, so we are going to take a comfort break at this point. We're going to resume at 12 o'clock for the item 6. So back in just over 10 minutes. Good afternoon, members. Welcome back. We now go on to item 6, which is the provision of feedback for the Anti-Poverty Task Force's Tackling Poverty Strategy 2024 to 2030. Greg Boland, Strategic Lead for Strategic Planning, People and Performance, is going to introduce the report and hand over to him now.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, councillors. The report before you today is the draft Tackling Poverty Strategy following extensive engagement by the Anti-Poverty Task Force. Today, we have 3 asks of Council. 1, the Council is asked to provide feedback and comment on the draft strategy to allow it to go to the Anti-Poverty Task Force on the 14th of November for approval. Secondly, the Council is asked to endorse the social contract within the strategy, which is no one should live in deep poverty, those unable to work should have a decent standard of living, support for increasing earnings for those who can work, low earners should receive benefits to ensure a reasonable standard of living, and finally, that we should invest in partnership coordination by working together to improve a no wrong door approach for service provision to enhance collaboration and resource efficiency. The Anti-Poverty Task Force was established in response to the cost of living crisis. The strategy makes a shift from responding to immediate need to implementing measures for longer sustainable change. This strategy
Can everyone please make sure that their microphones and their speakers are off on their devices, please?
This strategy is informed by extensive consultation with stakeholders, highlighting the need for a coordinated approach to tackle poverty effectively across Perth and Kinross. I'd now like to introduce Shahina Din and Gareth Ruddick, joint chairs of the Anti-Poverty Task Force, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll keep it very short and sweet. Some of you will know my face. I'm Gareth. I look after a fantastic organisation in Perth called Giraffe. And I've been part of the Anti-Poverty Task Force since its inception almost 2 years ago. As Greg mentioned, the focus very much immediately was on the crisis, but we're always very cognizant of the importance of looking at a deeper strategy and how we actually work towards eradicating poverty as much as possible. The report and the strategy in front of you is a representation of the kind of the leaps that have happened over the last couple of years and the fantastic partnership working that we've been able to coordinate. Whilst we're not out of crisis, I think that's very clear from the motions this morning. I think this strategy goes a long way to working towards fixing a lot. I'll just pass over to Shahina.
Thanks, everyone. So me and Gareth are co-chairing the task force because we actually care, and I'm sure all of you do care about poverty as well. There's a stark reality of approximately 1 in 5 of our residents in poverty. We do need to make sure that we're making the best use of the resources that we have. We don't have the fiscal levers locally in terms of benefits and how much we set them at, but we can do things differently, and we can make the changes locally to actually alleviate poverty. And I think that's what this strategy is about. The first thing that Greg mentioned was the social contract, and I think that's imperative because actually this strategy isn't mine or Gareth's, it's everyone's, and it takes all of us to actually say we're all committed to this strategy and we're all going to work together to make sure that we deliver on the strategy. So that's the first thing, and that's why the social contract is so important. I think one of the biggest challenges we've faced as a task force is the geographical spread of Perth and Kinross, the rural and the urban problems, but actually those things are not insurmountable and we can do those, but we just need to make sure that we take that partnership approach. And finally, we need to make sure that we engage with our communities because the people that are struggling with poverty are the people that know the best solutions for them. We've listened to the key issues, so we've got employment, childcare, transport and housing, and we're going to take our action plan to address these challenges. And we're obviously starting to implement cash first approaches and enhancing food security. Taking all of those approaches will help us to tackle poverty, but we do need to do this together. And I think I keep repeating this, but that's the message that I want to get across. And back to Gareth.
Just really to conclude, is probably to repeat a lot of what Sheena said, but not as eloquently. The whole approach of the task force is partnership. It's brought together all the sectors and all the key intermediary bodies and all the different departments within the local authority, which is why it will work. But it will work even better the more people that are talking about it, the more people that are aware of it, and the more we can channel everything, including the likes of this strategy, into people's kind of mindsets. That is pretty much everything. Do I hand back to yourself, Greg, or Provost? Sorry.
Thank you very much to both of you, and thank you for all your work on the task force. Members, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Donaldson first, and then Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. My apologies for earlier, but I got kicked out of the system and I tried to rejoin immediately, and hence all the disturbance. I regret that. Could I just ask, it's on page 26. It refers to the locality planning groups in Highland Pasture, Cooper Angus and Letham. Could I ask though, with South Creef, what, and this is specific to my local area, what are the likely next steps? And allied with that, we can't go for a scattergun approach. We need to be targeted in what we're doing and focused. Along with South Creef, are we looking at any other specific areas? Thanks.
Councillor Donaldson, I'd just like to wish Paul Smith could come on and just provide an update.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the locality working, South Creef is very much on our radar as our next locality to look at along with Perth City. And there is a wider rollout plan for locality working, targeting areas of need based on evidence and based on the figures that we're able to produce from our PK Insights dashboard and other sources of data. The Scottish Government have recently awarded us some funding to progress this work. So a wider rollout plan is being developed at the moment. A recruitment of a lead officer to take this work forward is underway as well. So we will be able to come back with more updates shortly, but we are progressing this work. And yes, South Creef is very much on the radar.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I warmly welcome the strategy and which endorse what's being proposed, and thanks to everyone who's involved in this. I do have questions about the governance. Looking at page 27, item 6, conclusion, it says this is an opportunity for committee members. I assume that's meant to be council members, but more important to make comment, etc. But the other thing I don't understand is 6.2 says governance arrangements to oversee the delivery of the strategy will be responsibility of the Anti-Poverty Task Force reporting to CPP. And then it says internally the council's contributions will be reported to the Poverty Theme Board, but there's no mention of the Poverty Theme Board anywhere else in the document, so I don't know what that is. And reported, presumably it says reported to the council through the annual performance report and the Child Poverty Action Report. Perhaps Greg could confirm. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. The Poverty Board is currently just something I've just kind of established, which to pick up the Council's priority. So the focus of that is a kind of a council pulling all our kind of different services together. Obviously, that then will feed in to, we obviously have the anti-poverty steering group, which is kind of certain members of the Anti-Poverty Task Force, which will obviously then report up then to the Community Planning Partnership. Obviously, we will keep council fully informed through the annual performance report, but that's the way that we kind of see the kind of governance working as we move forward, if that makes sense.
It does. So is that officers, the Poverty Theme Board, or is it officers and elected members?
The Poverty Board is currently council officers only, yes.
Thank you. Bailey next.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. My question is on section 5.2. There's a statistic there about it states there are insufficient jobs to go around. It says there are 100 people for every 82 job vacancies. So looking for a bit of insight, please, on how job vacancies are measured in that context, because it strikes me that in the olden times we knew where a job would be located, and we could assume that generally people in Perth and Kinross would only apply for jobs physically located in Perth and Kinross. With the new economy and the new ways of working, there are more and more jobs that can be done from anywhere in the country. How do officers take into account those sort of national level jobs or work from home opportunities in the job vacancy stats for a physical local authority area? Thank you.
Bailey, I'd like to invite Margaret Lynch, our poverty officer, onto the call, please.
Yes, thanks for that. So the job density statistics are provided by the Scottish Government, and they're provided at a local authority level. Being absolutely honest, I've never dug underneath to look at how, what methodology they use to come up with those statistics. I think the point you make is a very interesting one, and I'll take it offline and go and have a look at that. And because I think you are right. I think that the economy in that respect has changed since lockdown, and the travel to work area perhaps is different from what it might have been in previous years.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Greg, for the report. There's probably lots of questions, but I've picked on one and I'll just leave it at that. So on page 44, you've published what I would suggest is a social contract for Perth and Kinross. And it's quite heartening to see that you're not going to promise to eliminate poverty, because we can't do that. So that's well done. At number 3, though, you're suggesting that people should try to increase their earnings. Those who can work but are unemployed or underemployed should have the opportunities to find work and increase their income. And then further down the page, it says support job seekers and those wanting to work by helping them gain necessary skills, etc. Recently, we've found there are 120,000 people in Scotland between 16 and 64 who have never been employed. How do you deal with that statistic?
Thank you, Councillor. It's with difficulty. I think you're dealing with generational unemployment, and I think what we need as an organisation, I suppose, to fix it is to bring all the various parties together. There is no quick fix. It's not as easy to set someone up for an interview and then wish them on their way. It needs to be full wraparound person-centred support. It's been an issue within employability for 20, 30 years is how to approach that. I think what this strategy and specifically that Poverty Task Force and the members within bring together is such a wealth of experience across industry to actually affect that change, to create better in-work support and create, I suppose, better pathways for moving off benefits and the like.
Can I just also add to that? One of the things we've got to do is we've got to listen to people to understand why they don't want to work and why they can't get into jobs and what are the barriers to them holding down employment. And I think traditionally these people, or people that aren't able to work, are quite hard to engage with, which is what, if you speak to the local employability partnership, or if you speak to anybody that's supporting, there's be a certain community that people can't get access to. And I think we need to work better and we need to work differently to make sure that we're meeting people where they are and, finding them where they are rather than expecting them to come and find us, so that we can actually hear what they've got to say. And I think you'll see that within the poverty strategy, we've got the voice of lived experience, and I think we need to use that and we need to use it wisely.
Yeah, thank you for that. The question was more of support. You're going to have an awful lot of people out there who are in poverty, but really won't make a difference or won't try to make a difference. And I understand the difficulty that you're going to have with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen next, please.
Thank you, Prof. And thanks for your report, guys. I'm really supportive of the work you're doing in this report. In the report itself on page 21, Provost, there's an appendix to poverty estimates, which is actually quite a nice infographic to try and make absorbing some of this information a bit easier. It describes income as a minimum income standard as a weekly income for different circumstances. And obviously I've tried to myself envisage what actually this means in reality. And for me, if you need, say for the family of four in the bottom left of that infographic, £1,150 a week, then that escalates up to £55,000 a year net income, which is a gross income of about £65,000 a year. So the couple need to averagely earn each about 32, 33 grand each, which is a band 5 NHS worker, like a newly qualified nurse, etc., etc. Somebody works in labs, radiology, all that type of thing. But anybody who earns less than that is actually below the median and heading towards poverty. And to get to severe poverty, you're hitting about the £17,000 mark. Am I right in my notebook calculations? Because obviously it's not presented in a way that I think we can see the couple. Because I think the top left-hand side has a couple, and I think a band 4 NHS worker would earn enough to meet their numbers. And then it gets even more difficult when you see the single parent stuff. And I can't see how a single parent who doesn't earn a really good income cannot be in poverty when they have kids. I think that's what this infographic's trying to say. That's
I think that sounds right, but Margaret Lynch is going to answer.
Yes, so the minimum income standard, what the approach to that was taken was income's is a proxy measure that enables you to assess where the poverty line is and whether you're above or below it. But as a proxy measure, it doesn't really work, particularly for people in rural areas where the cost of food and fuel and whatnot is higher. So what the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and other organisations did, Gulbenkian and whatnot, was that they did a massive consultation exercise where they involved hundreds of people to basically identify what were the essential components of an acceptable standard of living. What if you were going to set a minimum income standard for everybody, what should that enable you? What kind of lifestyle should that enable you to have? And that's all unpacked in the methodology. And then what they did was they looked at what like I mean, what you would need to earn to attain that standard of living, taking into account the differing circumstances of families. So, for example, single parents typically would pay a lot more for childcare than families where you might have two adults, one of whom might only work part-time. But I'm happy to share the methodology of that with you. You know, I can certainly do that by email and show you how it all breaks down. It is quite shocking when you look at the rural minimum income standard and factor in the Scottish Government's research to that, and it shows, you know, that you really have to, you know, you have to be quite a hefty earner in order to be living, attaining a standard of living that is deemed to be acceptable. And I think what it does is it underscores the difficulties that people in rural areas are facing with poverty.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I accept everything you said. I think what's important to remove the stigma of poverty, I think we need to make sure that the public and people in general understand where that line truly is and what it actually takes, especially living rurally, to actually keep yourself out of poverty under the demands that people now currently face. And it's not as it was before, and it will never be the same again. So, you know, there's a lot out there, and it's I've always felt that people that end up in poverty, especially people who work, are the victims of a system that's failed them, not victims of their own misadventures, which some people seem to try and label all people in poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Forbes next, please.
Thanks, Provost. Bizarrely, Bailey asked exactly the same question that I was going to ask as my first question, so I'll move on to my second one, but I will come back to the work issue in comments. I'm on page 37 of the document, and it's things we did to tackle poverty in 23-24. It tells us 3,413 childcare places were provided. I'm wondering if that is 3,413 hours, 3,413 days, 3,413 children, or any other combination of the above, just to get some clarification on that, because I've certainly got a few constituents in my ward really struggling to find childcare places.
Greg?
My understanding would be that it would be the number of places, number of pupils, but I'm going to just ask Paul to just clarify my understanding, which might be wrong.
Thanks, Greg. Sorry, just coming back on. Give me 1 second. So it's 3,415 children in early years education and childcare. So we're talking about places. Is my understanding of that figure? Actual spaces available.
Councillor Forbes.
And is that children that we've defined as being in poverty, or is that just the total number of children getting these places?
No, just total number of children getting these places.
So it's not, am I misunderstand this? This isn't connected to whether these children are defined as being in poverty or not?
No, it's how many places we provided, which obviously is a help, but it's help for everybody, not just if you're in poverty.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Provost. My question is on page 40 of the pack, I think it would be. It's headed up at the top, poverty in context, and the first paragraph there talks about the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation and how we only have 3 data zones in Perth and Kinross, but how it generally doesn't seem to accurately or provide an accurate picture, perhaps, of the picture for poverty and severe poverty and deprivation across Perth and Kinross, particularly in areas like my own ward, which is very rural, and that people in that situation are probably kind of widespread, and there's no specific conglomeration, if you like, of poverty. And I wondered if there has anything been done at probably a national level to try and make the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation process more accurately reflect poverty to the benefit of our own situation in Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Shahina?
I know obviously that the Scottish Government did the Rural Action Plan, and that'll take into account all the different factors of living rurally which impact on people's poverty. I don't think they've done something specific to the SMID, but I think that they should, because it definitely is not a key indicator for Perth and Kinross, and it does miss the fact that there's so many people living in poverty. And in fact, when you speak to people and say, 1 in 5 people potentially in poverty in Perth and Kinross, they just look at you like, really? And that is partly down to that data set.
Sorry, yes, I know that in the past, I think we have as a local authority missed out on funding because we're not seen as having the levels of poverty that we actually do have. Thank you.
Paul Smith's going to add to the answer.
Yes, if I could just add add to the response. We do have frustrations with SIMD and how broad brush it is, and it doesn't really paint the picture for Perth and Kinross. And when we've had representatives from Scottish Government at our locality working in Highland Perth, we've made this point to them repeatedly. But we're also doing work locally with our locality profiles as part of our locality working to evidence the rural poverty premium and to understand that at a much more local level as well. So our locality profiles will give some indication of the issue, and they're much more help us to be much more targeted than relying on SIMD data, which is just too broad brush for our particular geographic and demographic situation.
And Gareth?
Paul stole most of my thunder there, but I was going to add into that, but I think it illustrates that there, as well as what Councillor McHugh was saying, there is no real correct and appropriate definition of what poverty is or what it looks like or how it feels or how to fix it. And I think the strength and the opportunity that we have in Perth and Kinross is that we are at a very, very micro local level seeing support and receiving feedback and understanding that poverty for one person is very different for another. As mentioned, the index of multiple deprivation is a very useful tool to tell a very, very, very high level story, but it in no way will help, small communities or, the likes of your Letham or your Blairgowrie, your Ale, whatever, or even just a street within. So I think what we need to do is to continue this lived experience work, the speaking to the people on the very front line of all the work through the third sector, the statutory sector, and that's where the true kind of picture of poverty will come from and give us, I suppose, the answers, if you like, to alleviate it as much as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Braun?
Thanks, Provost. Firstly, I just thank you for the report. I think when you made your introduction, you touched on a subject which I think is the most important priority of all, and it's summed up in 4 words, and that's simply, we have to care. And I think that's what it's all about at the end. That's the first priority in solving any of this. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was, people in poverty, whether it's deep poverty or less deep poverty or abject poverty, whichever descriptive word you want to use, one of the most important things they seek is hope. Hope that people are going to be there to help, hope that it's going to end. I can talk from personal experience for that. I just wonder how do you or how can you instill that sense of hope that that the help is here and it's going to help continue and it can find a way out in the end? Is there a way you can inspire people that way?
Yeah. Thanks for that. And yeah, we do care. And I think by showing that care and that compassion and making sure that people hear the stories of what's going on. So I think we've been a little bit guilty of not telling the story of what the Anti-Poverty Task Force are doing to the wider public, which is something that I'm working on with Greg, actually thinking about what a strategic comms plan looks like to make sure that people know where to go for support, what is out there, what they're missing out on, and all of those things. But telling those stories from the voices of people that have been through it and making sure that they're at the heart of it and actually treating them with dignity, with respect, and understanding that they know what they need. It's not me telling them what they need. They know what they need and getting them involved in the conversation. I think that's the best way of doing it.
Thank you very much. Councillor James next, please.
Thanks, Provost. I've got a couple of points. The first one is on page 24 of the report, 2.3, the last bullet point. It says encouraging businesses to offer fair work and good jobs. Should that read fair pay and good jobs? That was just a one-off. And further to that, in the actual report itself, I was looking at page 7, which sort of gives you the levels of poverty, and it sort of dawned on me while I'm reading through this paper that there's nothing that actually tells me what we define as poverty. It's a meridian of the whole of Scotland, but in Perth and Kinross, 50%, it's given in percentages. 50% of 100 is far more or far less than 50% of 200. And do we actually have figures? Because 1 in 5 people in Perth and Kinross is what you're telling me in poverty. What do we really define as poverty? I brought up 7 children on my wage only, and I wouldn't have. Oh yeah, it was hard, but I didn't consider myself in poverty. I'm just wondering how we define it. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you. Craig Boland.
Thank you, Councillor James. I'll pick up on the first point regarding fair work. So this obviously relates to wider than just pay, so it's in relation to also the voice and safe working conditions for a member of staff. And the second point, I'm going to pass to Margaret Lynch just to come on a bit more detail in there.
Hi, Councillor James, thanks for the question. So in relation to the numbers that we use, when we talk about there being 30,000 people in Perth and Kinross living in poverty, or the number of children living in poverty, we use the Scottish Government measure, which is the number of people who are earning less than 60% of median earnings, taken in, after housing costs are taken into consideration. But there are multiple different ways of measuring poverty, and I think particularly because of the rural nature of Perth and Kinross, using an income only based measure of poverty probably is insufficient, and that's why in the children's scorecard we kind of try and triangulate the data by using different approaches to measure poverty to give, if you like, a richer picture of just how many people might and how people are affected.
Thank you. Billy Williamson.
Thank you, Provost. My question is about health and wellbeing, and it seems to me from the graphics that have been presented that most people are probably just swimming along just above the poverty line, and suddenly one of the partners, either husband or wife, becomes unwell. They need to try and get to hospital to try and get treatment, and the transportation of costs and the loss of earnings of that could potentially cripple a family and drive them into poverty. And it seems to me that we're not capturing people before they reach the poverty point, and I'm just wondering if any work is being done to try and capture people at the front door when they do come into hospital and are on long-term sick, about what additional support can be given at that point rather than having to wait until they enter into poverty.
I can sort of respond where possible in that. There is no simple answer. I think one of the concerns with any strategy, with any initiative to help our local communities, comes at risk of trying to find those people, and how do we find them and where do we find them. I suppose what we have to rely on at that stage is very much that local micro knowledge. I'm assuming you've maybe been to the Lethem hub, for example. the understanding and the awareness of the teams that work within the Lethem Hub. They know everybody by name. They know their situation. They know when people are coming specifically because the food share is open in the evening and there's new faces coming because they're in work support. It doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I think it's relying on what strengths we have, which is a real kind of local approach, and we've got key stakeholders dotted everywhere to try and catch them. I think, do you want to add?
Yeah, maybe just thinking about that a little bit further as well, and adding it to our comms plan, making sure that people are aware of the support that they can get and where they can get that support. So I'll take that down as a note, actually.
Could I just add to the comments from Shahina and Gareth? We work very, very closely with NHS, and you probably see that within the child poverty report. We now have on hospital admission the offer of welfare rights check. Welfare rights team have done a lot of work with colleagues within NHS. So early intervention and prevention is absolutely key, and you can see that kind of us sort of stepping in and taking those longer term measures. I think what's also key is really the social needs screening that you'll see again within the child poverty report. That work that we're doing is ensuring that we're identifying people earlier. As we say, tackling poverty is everybody's responsibility. The awareness raising to communities and indeed across all of our services, organisations and partners is key, so that they're sort of identifying signs of poverty at an early stage. Within child poverty, we know those groups that are most at risk of poverty, and ensure that staff across all organisations are aware of the signs and the triggers for poverty, and they can step in and offer support at a much earlier stage.
I think probably, Claire, what I had in mind as well was the fact that, if you're requiring an operation, for example, you have to either travel to Nine Wells or Perth to get the, I'll call it the way in, and then for me, I don't understand why the NHS can't readjust its model so it's starting to deliver some of these types of clinics out in rural areas. So if you want to come down from, say, Bridge of Gore in my ward to go to Nine Wells, it's the best part of a 200-mile round trip just to go and get a thing where possibly it would be easier to get a doctor to come to Pitlochry and deliver that stuff locally rather than having to expect people to travel into Perth. And I don't think there's enough work being done on that particular aspect of delivery of service.
To add to that, just to think, we're hoping to flush out some of these nuances in some of the subgroups that we're setting up. So of course the transport subgroup first meeting will be in November, and hopefully something like that will start to try and flush these things out so we can do things strategically. It's the coordination of all the different services and support, and actually understanding all the issues that's been the problem, because we're, as Juana, who's the anti-poverty task force manager who's going out, she finds out one thing's happening somewhere, and so she tries to think about, right, okay, what can we do better, and finds out that somebody else over there is trying to tackle it in a different way. So at the moment the coordination part of it is the bit that's missing, which is what she's doing, and taking that coordination a step further and making sure that this social contract that we've all got, so we've all got a responsibility to tell the story. So yeah, hopefully I think that we can start doing that strategic work once we've got the groups together, which is what we're in the process of.
Thank you. Councillor Collins Stewart next, please.
Thank you, Provost. If I look at the sorry, maybe I should just say, I think that the answer about welfare rights and making sure that we're maximising the benefits that people are on, and the reference to no wrong doors in the report is really important. But if I look at what we did to tackle poverty in 23-24 infographic in the strategy, I see, in terms of creating jobs rather than helping people into existing jobs, we've managed to create 25 rural jobs for young people and helped 7 people into self-employment. If I look at the membership of the Anti-Poverty Task Force, there's one organisation there, GrowBiz, which is about growing the economy, and notably the Strategic Lead for Economic Development isn't on that Anti-Poverty Task Force. Are we missing a trick by not having more of a focus on growing the economy, creating jobs and bringing more high-paying jobs to Perth and Kinross?
I could probably answer that. So as Thomas and the like are aware, the Perth and Kinross Business Partnership is a reasonably new entity which brings all the key business players together, the chambers and Business Gateway and GrowBiz and the like, as you mentioned, as well as the third sector represented by myself. So the theory is that through the task force and through the likes of Jackie from GrowBiz and myself and other key members, we have a remit to, I suppose, ensure that enterprise and businesses, big, small, and otherwise, are also part of that conversation and ensuring that people who are in poverty or at risk of in poverty, it's not as a result of their employment or the business that they're operating or working within, if that makes sense.
Maybe add to that as well. One of the things that the Anti-Poverty Task Force are doing as a joint application to the Robertson Trust is an in-work pathways programme. So we've put in an application for an officer to work with people that are working within business but are still in poverty. And the application hopes to get the voices of lived experience, but also the voices of business, because it's important to understand both perspectives so that we can work collaboratively. So myself and Gareth and Jane from the CAB have been working quite hard on this application. We're through to stage 2 and we're hoping to hear quite soon as to where we get to with the In-Work Pathways programme.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to come in and respond to Councillor Stewart's comment. I think he makes an important point. There's a balance for us to strike in terms of supporting those individuals who require support through benefits, who are unable to access employment. But there is a significant body of work across the local employability partnership by the Council's team and by partners in the third sector. I know you raised this issue probably maybe 18 months ago, I think, Colin, Councillor Stewart, in terms of the programme. And that pipeline does have a number of stages at that. And there is a piece of transformation work going on just now, looking at the range of offers across those pipelines, some who are close to the employment market, some who've got some considerable distance and support needs before they'll get there. So that's a piece of internal work that we're looking at. Employment is a key route out of poverty, just as access to decent affordable housing, access to transport to support access to services and those jobs. So those, I think, are key in this new strategy, but there is work ongoing in terms of looking at employability and growing the economy.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Provost. My question relates to page 26 regarding the public consultation, specifically the sentence that says there was a public consultation which resulted in 89 responses. It would appear to me in the face of it that that's a rather low response, given that there's something like 30,000 people living in poverty. I just wondered if there was any reflection on that and consideration given to what strategies could have been used to broaden that reach, particularly in light of any future public consultations. Thank you.
I believe Margaret Lynch is answering this.
Yes, so the public consultation was conducted on PKC's consultation hub, and I mean, for better or worse, those are, you know, the number of responses that we got. However, the consultation exercise, which went out into communities and worked through community anchor organisations and local community groups, would have, you know, involved hundreds of people, and was probably, and it was done in a focus group format rather than the survey format, which was, you know, on the consultation hub, and that, I think, generated a very, very rich, you know, amount of information that was both broad in terms of its scope, but had depth and layer to it as well. So it was, you know, I don't think any of this stands on its own. It's how it all knits together. Would have been great to get more responses on the platform, the public platform, but certainly what I was told at the time was that that's pretty much par for the course. It wasn't significantly higher or lower than other similar consultations that have been using that platform. But
okay, thank you.
Councillor Duff, please.
I think that's my second question. I think there might be one or two still got a first to come.
I was just taking it as a come, but Councillor Peter Barrett, then Councillor Duff to finish.
Thanks, Provost and Councillor Duff. I wanted to kind of reflect on the comments that Claire Mailer made about a kind of more realistic approach to eradicating housing and the language that we use. And if you look at page 50 of the pack, page 18 of the strategy, we're still talking about reducing food bank usage, reducing homelessness and rent and council tax arrears. All of these things are going in the opposite direction. So I just wondered how realistic the indicators that we're putting forward here are, and whether, although it might appear that we're lacking in ambition, if we were to be looking at things such as limiting the growth of food bank usage, minimising the level of arrears, or looking for, you know, measures which actually indicate the support that we're providing and the difference that we're making, rather than looking for, you know, absolute improvement in things that aren't going to improve, not in the very short term anyway.
Do you want to take that, Greg? No? I mean, I would agree. I think, given the challenges that we face, I think, as you say, the use of the, you know, the language, is it kind of minimising, is it, you know, mitigating, or is it reducing? And I think we, you know, we can give that some thought in terms of these measures and the indicators. You can see the real challenges that we face. You see within the next report, you know, we've had a slight reduction in the number of children in poverty, which actually, given all of the challenges that we're facing, is you know, testament to the really, really good work that is underway. But yeah, take on board that point.
Shahina?
I just think we've got to, I think you're right. I think we have to be realistic. We don't hold the fiscal levers, but we can alleviate poverty and we can make things better. Just to let you know that the first public debt working group met a couple of weeks back, and that was welfare rights. I had CAB, Christians Against Poverty, a number of different groups meeting to discuss public debt and what we can do. And we've got a clear outcome at the end of that to think about how we can do things better. Somebody was saying that, you know, somebody could be in public debt and get a letter from the school saying, you know, you're due us for school meals, and then on the other hand they're getting rent arrears, and on the other hand they've got council tax arrears, not opening any letters. And we're thinking about ways that we can make this better. So there are things we can do locally, and realistically, yes, we don't control the income that goes into the pockets, but making sure that everybody gets what they're entitled to first of all, and that if we can, you know, make the process better and more respectful, then yeah, that's what we're aiming for.
I think what I also probably should have mentioned, and again, I think it is within one of the reports, that we are commissioning work with the Fraser of Allender to really measure the impact of our work, which I think will help. And again, as you can see, sit within the child poverty report, the measures within the scorecard continue to be sort of refined as we work, you know, to better understand some of the impacts and indeed some of the kind of causes of poverty.
Final question from Councillor Duff, and then I'm going to the Leader of the Youth.
Thanks, Provost. It's probably by way of feedback, as Greg had asked for, and observations. At the bottom of page 24, there's a mention of the Scottish Business Pledge, which I went to look to see exactly what that was, to find that it stated the Scottish Business Pledge has concluded and the initiative has been retired. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but it might be something that is no longer in existence. So perhaps that could be looked into. The other thing was in relation to references about housing on page 26, for instance. It talks about the lack of access to affordable housing, and as we know, I think I'm right in stating that by definition, affordable housing means a particular thing, and that it's not necessarily affordable to everybody. Housing that's termed affordable, and I wonder if we should just be careful that when we use that term, that it gives people the impression, if you like, that it's affordable to everybody, but with the use of that term isn't necessarily the case. And I wonder if you just use, social or affordable housing in its place. Thank you.
Happy to take account of that, Councillor Duff. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to Shahina and Gareth for coming along. We really appreciate you taking the time out this morning, or this afternoon in fact, and also for all the work you're doing, and the other members of the Anti-Poverty Task Force, if you could relay our thanks. And you may now take your seats again, and I will come to the Leader of the Council to move the paper.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks again to Shahina and Gareth for coming along, giving us a flavour of what has been done and what's going to be done, and take back to the rest of the...
Sorry, can you speak into the microphone? Just...
Yeah, but I'm looking at
I know, it's counterintuitive.
Right, sorry.
It means everyone else can.
Reprimanded again. Thanks for coming along, and if you can give our thanks back to the members of the task force, but also all the people who are actually at the coal face in delivering these services. It's important that they're remembered. Having to bring papers like this to the council gives me no pleasure at all. In this day and age, why should we have to have an anti-poverty task force in a developed country as this? So we can only try and do our best to, in the two-pronged approach of helping people with stick and plaster approach who are facing real hardship at the moment, but also giving them hope and give them a way to help themselves out of this situation that they find themselves in through no fault of their own. It was about 2 years ago that I stood here and proposed the establishment of an anti-poverty task force. It was clear to me then, and remains the fact, that we as a council alone cannot rid our communities of the blight of poverty. But working together with community groups, the third sector, local businesses and partner agencies, we can make much more of an impact. And it's to the credit of everybody that's here that we all agreed that this was a necessary step. As we have heard, despite being a relatively affluent area, Perth and Kinross has around 30,000 people living below the poverty line, with approximately 27,200 in deep or very deep poverty. The COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis have both contributed to a situation that requires dedicated and coordinated action to solve. For those living in poverty, every day it is a struggle, and things that are an inconvenience to many of us, like an unexpected bill or a spell of cold weather, can lead to a crisis for those on or close to the breadline. It is vitally important we support these people who find themselves in poverty. Those living in rural areas, as many do in Perth and Kinross, also face additional challenges regarding employment, housing, transport and more. Today's Tackling Poverty strategy, which has been pulled together following extensive consultation with all key stakeholders, marks a renewed determination to do more. Not simply to respond to the current and pressing needs of those in crisis, but also to chart a path out of poverty, to break the generational cycle, allowing families and individuals to escape poverty and to live life well. Within the Tackling Poverty strategy, the social contract sets out 4 key principles that will guide the council and its partners as we strive to lift residents out of poverty. You've heard them before, and I'll just read them again. These are: no one should be living in deep poverty. Those unable to work should not be in poverty. People should try and increase their income. Low earners should not be in poverty. And we should all be committed to working in collaboration to help mitigate poverty. I'd like to thank all those involved in developing this strategy. Once approved, the real work starts, turning words and intentions into actions. I hope we can all commit to working together as a council and with our partners through the Anti-Poverty Task Force to deliver our commitment to tackling poverty. I move the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader, to second.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, I don't know about anyone else in the chamber today, but I have been profoundly struck by the statistic that around 1 in 5 of the population of Perth and Kinross are living below what is described as the poverty line. Later today, we will focus on child poverty in particular, but what is crystal clear from this paper is that poverty very much impacts all ages and across both our urban and rural communities. And I know that the task force recognises this. Here in Perth and Kinross, we also know that we have a high and growing proportion of older people. So whilst understandably much of the focus is on children and families, the Council and the task force will, I am sure, also be taking all steps it can to help residents who are beyond working age, and most especially those living in a degree of social isolation, or for whom the struggle to make ends meet is something that they might be reticent to disclose. Provost, the Chancellor is currently on her feet. The Scottish Government budget will follow in 5 weeks' time, and this Council's budget debate will take place early next year. It is incumbent on all governments to do all they can to tackle these high levels of poverty. We elected members in this chamber, I am sure, will continue to support the task force in every way it can as a top priority for this Council. Provost, I'm happy to second this highly important report and wholeheartedly endorse its recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. I know it wouldn't be normal for officers to respond to anything that's said in comments, but I'm slightly concerned I may be misunderstanding this, so I'm happy if any officers want to correct me. But I'm going to go back to my question, which was about the number of events of childcare. And if I've got this right, it seems that we're saying we're doing something for the sake of poverty, but actually we're doing that anyway, and I don't really quite grasp that. But if I've misunderstood that, very happy to be corrected. Going back to the question I was going to ask, which Bailey asked instead, and it was about employment. I think I'm pleased to see that that's right at the top of the list, because getting people back into employment is the fastest way to get them out of poverty. And we know from discussions I've had at Tayside Contracts that they regularly struggle to get staff, and I've seen vans from a local care home provider driving around also asking for staff. So I think the jobs are there for people who want them. And I think we need to think carefully. We've used a lot of kind of benchmarking today and definitions, and I think we need to be careful about that. And I'm just going to tell you something very quickly, Provost. Earlier this week, I applied to the Cycle to Work scheme through the council to buy myself a new bike, and I was refused. And the reason I was refused this access to the Cycle to Work scheme is because the £67 a month that would have been taken from my council's allowance would put me below the minimum wage, and therefore put me by definition into poverty. Now, I'm very lucky. I don't feel poor, and I'm willing to bet that many people in this room don't feel poor. But I think that's where a definition may or may not let us down. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forbes. And if officers want to pick up with you offline, they will do so. Councillor Frampton next, please.
Thank you. In the report, page 25, 5.1, it is summarised that Perth and Kinross is a relatively affluent area. However, 30,000 people live below the poverty line. Perth has always been viewed as affluent. However, poverty has been an issue for as long as I can remember in Perth and Kinross. It's just more noticeable now than it ever was years ago. I totally agree with the report's statement. No one should be living in poverty or deep poverty, whether it's pensioners, single parents, disabled or the unemployed. The unemployed need employment to be better paid. This is especially needed in low skills employment. Many who take up these positions have family or their lone parents. Some will just be a few pounds over the threshold, therefore they will not receive any universal credit top-up to help them. No one in paid employment should be living in poverty either. However, there are far too many in Perth and Kinross who are living in work poverty. There is nothing more demoralising to a human being for to be in work, receive their wage at the end of the month, then have to pay out most or all of their wage on bills, council tax, rent, mortgage, and other credit or debt obligations, then be left with pennies to support themselves or their families. They're living from payday to payday. This then forces families or individuals to accumulate debts by borrowing to get through the month, leading to deeper poverty for some. It's for these reasons I welcome the recommendations to endorse the anti-poverty strategy going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frampton. Bailey McLaren next.
Thank you, Provost. I think all of us are in agreement with the contents of this report, and it's sobering, as is other items on our agenda today. There's been mention about the rural challenges, and representing a ward that is in the most rural, the higher cost of fuel, access to transport, higher heating costs, and particularly higher food costs. You know, these challenges are ever increasing, and I support all efforts by all groups who have been involved in the anti-poverty task force and ongoing. This is tough. This is really tough. Particularly within my ward, Bank Food have set up a food share pantry, which I've been delighted to have supported them in the efforts to do so. And that's revealed sobering situations, you know, that we didn't realise that were sitting there as well. So the collaborative approach, the shared knowledge to attempt to dive into this is tough, but it's very welcome, and it's right that we sit and support this. I also am heartened to hear of the application to the Robertson Trust. Having followed the Robertson Trust awards each month, I've noticed over the last sort of 8-10 months that there's been not many awards given to Perth and Kinross, and I have wondered why. And I believe that they've reformulated their strategies, so I do look forward to seeing that as a positive award that comes our way. So just echo all my thanks. Last comment I'll make, and maybe just put this to council leader, my fellow ward colleague here. I believe that GrowBiz have not yet had their funding confirmed, and they're an essential part of this conversation. So I would look down the table here to council leader and see if there's anything he could be doing about that. Thank you.
You can pick that up directly, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Can't make any commitments on any funding when we're in this at this stage. We need to have evidence in front of us, and I'm sure the officers will be looking at that, and I'm sure that GrowBiz will be considered in the round and will probably be well worth some of their funding.
Really don't want to get into back and forth. If you can pick it up directly with council leader later on.
I missed maybe informed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Provost. Tackling poverty needs to be the first priority of this council. Our constituents shouldn't find themselves and their families stigmatised by their financial or employment position that leaves them in poverty. Given at any point in their life, this can happen to any of us. 10% of employees in Perth and Kinross are not even paid the real living wage, and that's something we need to drive harder as a council and harder with our businesses. And as a council, provide the circumstances in which this is much easier for our businesses to do as well. Our need to use the Joseph Rowntree Foundation guesses at what poverty is just isn't acceptable. It's nobody's fault as things currently stand, but I think it's something that needs a lot of work on, probably at COSLA and government level, to get more accurate information so that services can be targeted more effectively to get better outcomes. The children's scorecard that's mentioned in the next paper, I think is part of the process of being able to identify things more accurately and provide better support. 27,000 people in deep or very deep poverty in Perth and Kinross. And if you have a disabled member in your household or you're from an ethnic minority, this is more likely. You know, this is a statistic that should concern us all and something that needs challenged. It seems from the report that income-based isn't an appropriate way to challenge and to identify poverty, especially rural poverty. It does cause a lot more to live rurally. It's colder, you live further away, your access to different types and value of shops is different, and this needs addressed. Consultations have shown that work and wages seems to be high on the list of why people feel they're in poverty. You have access to the number of hours that they want to work rather than what's available to them, and the rates of pay for the jobs that they can do with the skills that they have. We obviously need to invest in skills so that people can do better paid jobs and that employers then have access to employees who are better trained and they can expand and new businesses can move to the area. And it's the only way that people will escape the grip of deep poverty. I think the council does take its responsibilities around poverty very seriously. I think setting up the task force in the first place was a good step, but I think even around that, we work closely with our partners. We have increased our affordable housing, which is both the social housing that the council builds and the housing from our social landlords. New build properties that we can buy off the shelf, buybacks in which we are massively exceeding our requirements this year, and we have the acquisition of 20 properties in Dunkeld, which is currently in process through great work and collaboration from the ward members in that ward and ward officers. The cash first approach is essential and has been mentioned by others. The great work of our welfare rights team to maximise the income of all people in Perth and Kinross, but I think one of the things we have to highlight at this moment in time is around pension credit and that near £4 million that could be in the hands of the people of Perth and Kinross, and not just their pension credit would then be in their hands, but obviously their winter fuel payment would also be in their hands because the two are now linked by the Labour government in Westminster. So we need to encourage everybody to ensure that if they meet the criteria for pension credit, that they get support on doing this. And I know our welfare rights team have been doing that work. Rural challenges with increased costs must not be ignored. And we must have individual plans for tackling poverty going forward, that it's not just an urban issue. Working in collaboration is essential. The public, third sector and community partners all have to work together to solve these issues, to identify the local pressures and what's needed. We need to secure extra resources out with the public purse, and there are organisations out there who do provide support and monies for supporting these initiatives, and the collaboration and cooperation to do that is something that is needed. Education training I've mentioned for job seekers to get better jobs, and providing an environment where fair work and fair pay gives you good jobs. Residents in Perth and Kinross need the right to help at the right time. Children and families benefit when they can access the support they need when and where they needed it. With joined up services, we all need to lobby governments and also tackle poverty as their first priority. Move beyond providing emergency support for individuals and families. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Peter Barrett next.
Thanks, Provost. It's normally a case of Tommy saying I agree with everything that Peter says after I've spoken, but in this case I'll pay him that compliment. I think if we're going to be serious about this and make tackling poverty the sort of defining mission of this council, then that has to follow beyond warm words in this chamber. And I think too often in the past it hasn't done. I don't think that you could say our budget setting approach for the last 10 years has had a meaningful focus on really tackling poverty. And I think the challenge this time round is, are members going to be up for that, or are we going to be into the same old Dutch auction that has afflicted this council for far too long? I think I've kind of made my views clear in earlier items on this agenda, that I fully endorse the social contract approach that we've been asked to endorse. And I did touch on the fact that we needed to respond in a holistic, but also in a compassionate and targeted fashion. It is all very well to say that there are jobs out there, but if you're a single mother and there's no convenient childcare and there's no public transport to take you and your kids to the childcare setting, or if the hours of the childcare provision that you're entitled to don't match with the work hours that you might have with Tayside contracts or with the social care sector, then the jobs are going to be there, but you're not going to be able to take them up. And we have had success in the past on dealing with that sort of issue. There is the Grobes and social care work that was done in Highland Perthshire that delivered jobs for, I think it was around about 37 women, creating small and micro businesses. Certainly when I heard about the success of that, I spoke to both Grobes and Letham for All to see if there was a model that could be deliverable in an urban setting in Perth. And certainly the barriers to getting into employment and also into well-paid employment are being looked at in that context. So I do think that in 2 weeks' time, when we begin to look at the budget process, then both this paper and the next one need to be featuring at the forefront of our deliberations, as well as what our officers going to bring us in terms of how do we translate the ambitions and the sentiments, as well as the actions that are plans that are included this into delivery. It's all very well saying that we need to lever in external funding, but by and large, we can work smarter, we can use data better, but it will be incumbent on this council to come up with increased resources, either through savings exercises elsewhere or through new money through a council tax in order to actually deliver on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rebeck.
Thanks very much again, Provost. I'll be brief. My stomach's telling me it must be lunchtime soon, so I will go on with it. But it is important, though, to thank Greg and his team for the report, which is an excellent one. But even more important, to thank the ongoing work of the Anti-Poverty Task Force, particularly those that who do it as volunteers, is appreciated. Thank you. But I think it's also important to note that, and the report does touch upon it actually, although we've spoken at length here about financial poverty, which is often the most distressing aspect of poverty, it is also about poverty of service as well. And I know the hub in Letham has helped that. Where I live, and I deliberately say the hub in Letham because although I understand why people call it the Letham hub, it's important to note that actually it's not just for the people of Letham, it should be for the people right across Perth and indeed Perth and Kinross. And that has certainly helped, but it's also about poverty of opportunity. And I think what's really frustrating these days is the road into employment used to be the road out of poverty. It's not anymore. And that's really regrettable, or it's not always anymore. Which is regrettable. And I think when we speak about escaping poverty, it doesn't necessarily mean that people want to escape where they live. They want to escape being poor. They don't necessarily want to escape the community which they've lived in all their lives and which they're happy in And I think we need to recognise that as well. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. Bailey McLaren, you have a point of clarification.
Yes, I just, when I mentioned Growbridge, it was about Scottish Government funding, not Perth and Kinross funding. So just to make that clear.
Okay,
So that
thank
my
you.
mistake, my mistake.
Thank you. Okay. Leader of the Council to sum up.
No need to sum up.
Thank you very much. Members, can we agree the report? Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to break for lunch here and we'll resume at 2 o'clock.